Albert Nguyen, you know him better as the analytics capper. He's over there at Action Network doing a great job holding it down, taking a look at some football, basketball, baseball, you name it, he does it. He's a 5-tool player, and Albert, it's always great to have you aboard. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Greg, for having me. It's another great weekend, amazing with basketball, and then we have hockey playoffs starting tomorrow night, so I'm super excited. Greg, thanks for having me on.
Yes, let's go on the NHL playoffs. Just some of the best theater that you're going to see in all of sports. That's going to be a lot of fun, and it was a lot of fun to see what we got on Sunday. As something that I've been talking about quite a bit on this show is that it just feels like with the NBA playoffs, this lingers back from last year as well. If you like an underdog, might as well take them on the money line because they either lose and don't cover or they win outright. That has been the case thus far as all three money line underdogs were able to come through pending this Denver Nuggets versus Minnesota Timberwolves game. As we do this, we don't know the result of that quite yet, but what have you been making out of this trend? Because now it's 2 years running, and I just think that with regards to taking a look at the NBA playoffs, you might as well be taking a look at some of these underdogs because it feels like a lot of teams, they get down by double figures and in a 7-game series, they decide, you know what, let's just conserve a little bit of energy for the next game.
Yeah, Greg, that's a great theory. I'm not sure why we're seeing this trend, right? But I do agree that it is a trend right now. We have seen 3 of 3 underdogs win outright tonight or today, and I think tonight's going to end up being 3 for 4. To be honest, I think Nuggets right now. I'm watching it on my other eye here with my.
The Timberwolves don't look good.
Yeah, the Nuggets are up 17, and the Minnesota Timberwolves offense is not scoring at all. So, that is what it is. But you're right. Looking at the games today, whether it's the Lakers, whether it's the Heat, that was a very impressive win on the road, or the Clippers going into Phoenix against a KD-led team that hasn't lost, right, with him starting since that trade. So, I mean, all 3 games, and you know me, Greg, I'm a contrarian bettor. I favor the underdog naturally anyway, so I'm loving the results.
Absolutely, and it was a great day for you on Sunday. And what do you make out of the Suns versus Clippers series? Because I don't think the Clippers are going to be able to win this series, but I also found it to be a little bit disrespectful that they were north of $5 underdogs in a lot of spots. This actually got up to $6 underdogs in terms of the series price. And for the Clippers, yeah, it's been a little bit of a herky-jerky sort of run for them. Paul George being out of the fold hurts, but I felt like this was frankly disrespectful, and I feel like we've anointed the Suns a little bit too early with them having only 8 games to be able to gauge Kevin Durant. Granted, a very good 8 games for them, but chemistry, in my opinion, still matters in the NBA, and I felt like that really took center stage on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, let's set the stage here. From a 30,000-foot view, the Phoenix Suns coming into the playoffs were undefeated with Kevin Durant in their starting lineup, right? Greg mentioned it, 8-0. But if you look at the opponents that they beat during that stretch, weren't really strong opponents, and there weren't really opponents that were actually trying to win. Some were trying to lose on purpose or tank towards the end of the season, and some were playoff teams that were already locked into their seats, so they didn't play hard as well. So you're right. I think that the Suns were a little overvalued, but again, I do want to put respect on the Phoenix Suns name. I think this is the best top 4 in the league with Durant, Booker, Chris Paul, and DeAndre Ayton. This was a game where they got a little bit exposed, and I mentioned this many, many times in the last several weeks. Kawhi Leonard at the peak of his powers is not that much less, I would say even equal to Kevin Durant at the peak of his powers. And we're seeing a healthy Kawhi. 90% of the San Antonio Kawhi is what we're seeing right now. They're both 2-time finals MVPs, 2-time NBA champions. I mean, this is going to be hopefully a long series because I'm on the over 5.5 games here.
Yep, and I think that you're looking very good on that over. I certainly don't think that the Phoenix Suns are going to get swept. The Clippers, there's no way humanly possible they can get swept in this one as well. I do think that we're going to be able to get 6 or 7 games, and I don't know how much of a subscriber you are on the zigzag theory when it comes to playoffs in general, because I'm not someone that I want to be just blindly betting on a team that perhaps lost game 1 in a series or anything like that. I do think that it carries a little bit of gravitas, though, and how do you gauge it where we've got a situation like the Phoenix Suns that dropped game 1? Obviously, all the favorites in game 1 of the games that were played on Sunday, they are going to need to bounce back in game 2, pending that Nuggets versus Minnesota Timberwolves game, but I do think that there is a little bit of something to the team that loses in game one coming out with a little bit more fire in game two.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the beauty or the tragedy of the playoffs, depending on how you look at it, whether you prefer a 1-game playoff or a 7-game series. I like the 7-game series because generally, Greg, the law of large numbers, or the more games you play, in general, the better team is going to end up on top. And it's going to take a lot of amazing effort, a lot of luck, and amazing performances by the Clippers to win 4 games against who I think is the superior team in the Suns. Paul George is out for the Clippers. That didn't really hurt today, but I think that's going to hurt in a 7-game series, obviously. As far as your question regarding the zigzag, I do like that look. It's really case by case. Like, for example, I'm not looking at the Warriors in game 2, right? They lost game 1 in a really competitive game in Sacramento. I think the whole world is expecting them to come back and tie it up 1-1. I'm going to really wait to see how the line moves in that series before I fire in game 2. But with this particular one, Suns and the Clippers, I do think it's going to go more than 5.5 games. And I do think what was exposed here is the Clippers' lack of depth. And we all knew that coming in when they made the Kevin Durant trade, without Mikal Bridges, without Cam Johnson, a couple guys hurt as well. They are really hurting after the first five players.
And I am so glad that you brought up that Warriors versus Kings series and the fact that you're not going to be looking at the Warriors in game 2, because I thought that this was one of the most interesting series out there because it was the lone series in which the lower seeded team was the favorite. And I know that there's a lot of people that like to say, oh, this former championship team, this former championship player, insert the just very, very good player / team here. They're just going to flip the switch for the postseason. And I don't think that it's that easy with the Warriors. They were absolutely deplorable on the road, and I think that they're going to be able to take care of business when they go back to San Francisco, and I see them winning this series, but I don't understand why the price was so demonstrative, them being north of a minus 250 favorite entering into the series where they have yet to win a game they have yet to really win games on the road all season long, and they're going to need to win at least one in Sacramento in order to take this series.
Yeah, for that particular series, you can look at it both ways, right? De'Aaron Fox had an amazing game, 38 points. Malik Monk had an amazing game. He closed the game really, really well for the Sacramento Kings. And with all that being said, the Warriors only lost by a bucket or two. It came down to one possession. Or the other way you want to look at it, Steph Curry and Klay Thompson combined for 11 three-pointers, and they still lost. You don't expect that kind of production, even though it is Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. 10, 11, 12 three-pointers is a lot to expect from two players night in and night out. Or the other way you look at it, Domantas Sabonis had a pretty bad game offensively. Yes, he did have a good game on the glass, but he wasn't shooting well, and he was very tentative, especially in that fourth quarter, going one-on-one against Kevon Looney. So you could look at it a multitude of ways. I like that Sacramento King has been the more consistent team all year round. They've been a really good home team, obviously. They've been one of the best away teams, road teams in the NBA, and I think that's going to make a difference because I know on one side, everyone's expecting the Warriors to steal at least one game in Sacramento. I think that the Kings are going to steal one game in San Francisco.
And I love the fact that you bring that up as well, because with Steve Kerr, every single playoff series that he has coached with the Warriors, the Golden State Warriors have won at least one game on the road. And I do think that that is going to be the case. I did not think that that was going to be game one, but taking a look at the West, you've got one team that was more than one game above 500 on the road, and you just mentioned them in the Sacramento Kings. 25-16 was their road record. The only other team that was above 500 on the road in the Western Conference, the team that just won on Sunday in the LA Clippers at 21-20. And for those wondering, Warriors, they went 11-30 on the road. That win that they got on the road against the Sacramento Kings, the Kings had Alex Len in their starting lineup. So do want to be keeping that in mind, and we shall see if we're going to see craziness out east, because we saw a lot of carnage in the Bucks versus Miami Heat game one of that series with Giannis dealing with an injury. Tyler Hero breaks his hand. We've got to get the thoughts on that with our good friend Albert Nguyen, the analytics capper over at Action Network, next right here on the Greg Peterson Experience on VSiN, the Sports Betting Network. Albert, we talked a lot about these Western Conference teams in the last segment. Let's give a little bit of love out east. And the Miami Heat, they score 130 points in their Game 1 win over the Milwaukee Bucks. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that they're probably not going to score 130 points in Game number 2. But what were your takeaways from what we saw in Game number 1? Because on top of the actual score itself, I think the bigger piece of significance was the guys that went down, and Tyler Hero with a broken hand, along with Giannis Antetokounmpo dealing with a back issue.
Yeah, 2 big injuries to 2 stars. Obviously, Giannis is a 2-time MVP, Finals winner, Finals MVP. The impact of Giannis's loss is going to be felt much larger, but I think Giannis is going to come back soon in the series. Whereas with Tyler Hero, a broken hand, I mean, you're pretty much out, right? You're pretty much out. That's a big loss to their offense. Greg, you mentioned it. They dropped 130 points on the Milwaukee Bucks today, and Milwaukee has been playing amazing 2-point defense all year long. They just gave up a bunch of drives to the baskets, and then they kicked it out to guys like Gabe Vincent or Jimmy Butler, and they did their thing. Because the Miami Heat for the season, they only averaged 109 points, so I don't think that we can expect them to have another big, offense explosion with 130. I like the Bucks here. I think obviously it's still juicy to go Milwaukee here for the series, but I think they're going to get it done, whether it's in 5 or 6 games. I don't know if the Heat, especially at home, there's really no home court advantage. They're one of the worst against the spread home teams all season long. So I like the Bucks to come out hot in Game 2 and then, really take over the series after Game 3.
Yep, that series price I'm seeing right now at DraftKings on the Bucks, it is still minus 230, but whole heck of a lot less than you were laying just 24 hours ago when that was right around like minus 1,000 in some places, maybe even a little bit greater than that. So getting a nice discount there. And when it comes to the Memphis Grizzlies, you're now able to get them at a nice plus price. I'm seeing them at DraftKings at a plus 185 to come back in their series against the LA Lakers. But that Ja Morant injury, I think that's a big deal. Don't want to bury the fact that Anthony Davis, for a little bit of a period in that game as well, was claiming that he could not move his arm. That's not necessarily great, and that's something to keep in mind with the LA Lakers. But for the Memphis Grizzlies, there was big-time concerns with them to start out with how they were going to be able to guard Anthony Davis down low, and it was just a disaster for them in Game 1 that I really don't know how it could have went any worse, especially with Ja Morant getting hurt.
No, props to the Los Angeles Lakers and Rob Pelinka here. They had 4 guys that scored over 20 points today, Greg. That's the first time in this franchise, I believe, since 1988 in a playoff game with Magic, Kareem, Worthy,
and Showtime
Lakers. That is a big stat because there's been so many successful teams from 88 to now, and this is the first time with 4 guys in the 20-point range. That's a lot of depth. Obviously, you don't expect Rui Hachimura to shoot that well and score 28 or whatever he did today. But if he takes a step back, you'll have guys like Vanderbilt. You have guys like Malik Beasley or D'Angelo Russell step up too. So this team is really, really deep. And LeBron didn't even have a great game. He played really good defensively, but offensively he had some really bad turnovers. Austin Reeves is doing what he's doing, especially in the pick and roll. He's demoralizing, the defense on that switch when the big gets on him. He's really looking for Anthony Davis on the roll. If not, he's going to take that mid-range shot, and he's really good at drawing fouls. So I think that's a really big indication of how confident he's been and how he's changed his game, because if he can really manipulate the defense and draw fouls, it really changes everything. But I think the biggest influence or impact on this game is Anthony Davis on the defensive end. He had 7 blocks and 3 steals going up against the most likely defensive player of the year in Jaren Jackson Jr. 10 stocks, Greg. 10 stocks. That is super, super impressive.
Yeah, he was absolutely amazing. And keep in mind, this is now the Rui Hachimura and Austin Reeves super team with LeBron James as help. Now, I'm kidding, of course, but that was very fun to see in Game 1, and I do think that the Lakers, they've got a good shot of being able to pull this one off. Ja Morant dealing with the injury, and being able to steal one in Memphis, where Memphis had lost just 6 times during the regular season, doing it in game one, that's just absolutely massive for them. And, well, we've got some massive games coming up on Monday as well. Not necessarily as big of a slate as we had for game one and game two, the NBA playoffs, rightfully so. They start things off with a bang, but we've got 2 games that are going to be going down. Warriors versus the Sacramento Kings, which I think that we touched upon quite a bit, the fact that you really don't like the Warriors in this bounce-back spot with them being a slight favorite. But how about this Nets versus Philadelphia 76ers series, as this is a game that right now we're seeing for game 2, the 76ers be a 10-point favorite. They were an 8.5-point favorite in game 1. Typically, you do find with a little bit more of a zigzag theory like we were talking about a little bit before, you'll find a little bit more love for the underdog. Not much love here, and I can't really blame bookmakers on this one because the Nets, they got completely pummeled in game number 1. Are you looking for a little bit of a better effort from the Nets in game number 2?
Yeah, game 1 was a little surprising to me, to be honest. I thought if the score went over, which it did, it would mean that the Nets were getting out on the break, getting, transition buckets at the rim or maybe wide open threes. They definitely ran a lot. They just missed a ton of shots. Super surprising that it went over and the favorite covered there. I'm not gonna touch the side here in this game. I'm gonna believe that the Nets can continue to run. I think that's the only way that they can stay competitive in this series because they don't have a Joel Embiid. They don't have an MVP down low to really dominate the game. And, Nick Claxton, who's a great defender in his own right, is giving up, 60, 70, 80 pounds against Joel Embiid. So there's no way they can really play in the half court, slow it down like the Sixers can. So I think the Nets are continuing to run. I think they're going to continue to jack threes left and right. And I think I like the over here. So it's gone a little against the movement, open up around 216 and a half. Right now it's only at 213 and a half. I like the over because I think the Nets are going to push the pace.
By the way, I do think that it is my duty to talk about this. The Denver Nuggets are right now blowing out the Minnesota Timberwolves, but I think that it was Kyle Anderson along with, I would like to say Christian Brown, that were getting into a little bit of a kerfuffle. Yep, it was Brown that was getting into it, and I believe that Kyle Anderson, he got into it a little bit. We shall see if that has implications for game 2, if there might be a little bit of a suspension, if there might be a nice little slap on the wrist fine there. So that is of fascination as well. But taking a look at some of the other game 2s that we are going to be finding, we've got another rather demonstrative underdog with regards to the Eastern Conference, with the Boston Celtics being a 10 to a 10.5 point favorite against the Atlanta Hawks. And I do think that the Hawks are going to be able to seal a game in this series. I don't think that game is going to be coming in Boston, though. I do think that the Celtics just completely have this Hawks team outgunned, and I think that the Hawks' best hope is just having Trae Young go out, have a massive Game 3/Game 4 in Atlanta, and that's the only way that they're able to seal a series. I'm not sure how you view this game, but this is one where I'm going to be looking at the favorite a little bit more.
Yeah, full transparency. I'm a little disappointed in the Hawks. I was on them in the first game. They got it really interesting in the, end of the third, beginning of the fourth. They got on a run there. But Trae Young is just not shooting very well in the playoffs. In the last 7 games total, so that spans across 2 series, he's shooting the worst 3-point percentage in the history of the NBA playoffs with that many attempts. So if Trae Young is going to shoot that poorly, there's just no way that they're going to compete against the Celtics, who are very well coached. They have 2 superstars at the wing position, awesome defense down low with Robert Williams and Al Horford. And again, they are super deep with Brogdon, who might be the 6th man of the year, Marcus Smart, Derek White. I mean, it goes on and on and on. This is a NBA Finals ready team, and I don't think the Hawks can really compete with them if Trae Young is off. But if Trae Young is going to hit threes, 4, 5, 6 threes in game 2, I think they have an outside chance of covering. Because if you look at their roster, it's not like the Hawks are pedestrians either. I mean, they still have DeJounte Murray, John Collins, Okongwu, DeAndre Hunter, who I really like, Sadiq Bey, who's a solid shooter, Clint Capella down low to grab rebounds and run to the rim for you as well. They have a really good team. Quinn Snyder is a great creative mind on the offensive side, but without Trae Young playing Trae Young 30, 40, 50 points, they just don't have a shot.
Yeah, I think that it's going to be difficult for the Hawks, and I do think that there's going to be that one game in Atlanta where you could see Trae Young go into flamethrower mode. I don't think that it's going to be game 2 in Boston.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.